Yeah, I mean, I had a desire to answer people's questions. Why does God allow so much suffering? All these kind of apologetic questions. I didn't have the answers. I knew I needed to, you know, get some information on that, have some answers ready.
Buongiorno. You're listening to Going, Where God is at Work, a podcast where cross-cultural workers discuss everything from faith and fear to finances and faux pas. We're walking out our call to ministry in faraway places, and we're happy to have you join us on the journey. I'm your host, Jesse Pauli, missions leader serving in Rome, and I'm here with Alessandro Di Leonardo, church planner in Cisterna di Latina, and Jen Williamson, our missiologist who lives and works in Lyon. And today, if you caught our last episode, we have a special guest with us. Jen, you want to go ahead and introduce our guest?
Yes. Hi, Becca. Becca Taylor is here with us. And I've known Becca for 13 years now. We met in the small town of Loches, France, which is just south of Tours, where we were both working together on a church planting team. And one of the things you'll notice about Becca right away is that she just has a very winsome personality. And Becca can make friends faster than I can make a cup of tea. And she is just gifted at relationships and also at sharing the gospel. She's an evangelist. Here we were on this church planting team. There were about, I don't know how many, a few of us. And Becca would have more gospel conversations in an afternoon than I would have in a month. So she just has this ability to love people really, really well, really naturally. It's super authentic. And to build with them a relationship that invites them to be curious about what makes Becca come alive. And what makes Becca come alive is Jesus and her passion for Christ. So it's been a real privilege. She's also just been a great friend to me and encouragement to David and I. The type of friend who's done everything from walk your dog to clean your house. So
Oh, wow.
I just really appreciate Becca. So I'm glad she could join us today.
Well,
Thanks for
welcome,
having
Becca.
me. Thank you.
Welcome.
Well, before we get into our interview and discussion with Becca, we want to continue our conversation today about evangelism. We've been doing these mini series, and we are trying to do some theory, some theoretical things before, and then interview with someone who is gifted in that area, and then we want to do some resources on the next episode. So before we jump into evangelism and hearing all about Becca's experience, let's share some of our evangelism fails. We're all here living cross-culturally. We've all decided that, we want to be a witness wherever we are. And so what are some fails that we've had? And Becca, feel free to jump in at some point, and if you have any fails, share them with us.
I could get started. This actually happened back home in the other church I was serving at. So we decided to do an evangelism, where we kind of have like a fair, get all these balloons and all that stuff and everything you could think of to kind of draw the crowd in. And before doing that, as I was planning, I was working with a church planter. He was kind of like my mentor, because he knew that I was going to come to Italy, be a church planter. So he was working with me. And so I remember I told him we were going to do this. And he said, oh yeah, we did something like that once, and we got a bunch of emails from people, this and that. And then all of a sudden, as we packed up, we lost the paper. Like, we just left it there and we couldn't find it. So like, zero follow-up. And I just remember saying, why are you telling me this? Like you're supposed to guide me and stuff. And you know what happened? When we had the event, we had all the sign-ups, all that stuff, and guess what? We lost the paper. We literally did the exact same thing that he told me happened to him. And so that was a major fail. Although some people did end up coming to the church, because we did the event right outside the church, and but still, that very thing that he warned me about his life experience, I ended up dropping the ball as well. So major fail there.
When we first moved to Lyon, they were doing this big campaign called Un Cœur pour Lyon, which means one heart for Lyon. And all of the churches were working together and planning this big evangelistic outreach. And there was some really great concepts in there, in that they were like, all the weeks leading up to it, we were, different people and places were planning different events around town. So like our church did a little art workshop right in a square by our church where people could bring families and do little art projects and stuff like that. And there we just, would say, hey, we have this nearby church or whatever, but we didn't necessarily do anything gospel related. But it was all supposed to be leading up to this, inviting people to this big, where we had like world-class evangelists coming in where they were going to do sort of the Billy Graham style of announcing the gospel, and we were going to follow up. And so when we go finally to the big event, I am not kidding, every person there was already a church member. All of these efforts where we were supposed to be in our neighborhoods inviting people to this big outreach event, and everyone I look around, the whole stadium is full of people with the blue shirts, which were the people, one heart for Leon on our t-shirts. And I'm like, I would be shocked if there's one person who doesn't know Christ in this whole auditorium.
Wow. Yeah, I was trying to think of what failed to share. One of the ones that stood out to me was I had been, in my first year here in the field, kind of building a relationship with one of the guys who was a refugee here and was trying to learn Italian and get settled. And we had been meeting all the time, doing all kinds of stuff together. And I thought like we really had a good friendship. We were building. He knew I was a believer. He said he was a Christian, but I forget of what denomination. Anyways, it was still unsure of if he had a salvation experience or not. And so anyways, we were talking all the time and doing all these things. And he even came to some Discovery Bible studies that we were doing. And then we were just, he and I one day, and I started asking him like, hey, could we pray together? Could we read the Bible together as part of our relationship? And I thought like after, 7-8 months of like building rapport and hanging out and doing all these things, it's like, this is going to be textbook right way to do this. Anyways, he looks at me, he's like, I will not pray with you. You are not, I forget what denomination he was with. I think it was Eritrean Orthodox. Anyways, it was heartbreaking to me because then he like the relationship was just like that was it. Like he never texted me again. He didn't want to talk. He didn't want to get together because I had asked him. So I felt like a failure there, and I still think about that time. Like, man, did I do something wrong or what happened? But anyways,
I say that's a rejection, Jesse. That's not a failure on your part. You did do everything right.
Well, thank you. I don't know.
Yeah, you need some healing here. I felt like I needed to interject because that's not a failure. That's a rejection, and that's part of it.
Yeah, that's true.
Quite.
But it's right, it can feel like a failure to us. And when we don't see people engaging in praying with us or going further in their relationship with the Lord. So I have a bit of a story. It's a partly success story, partly failure. I remember going to what we call in the UK, this was before I came to France as a missionary. I went to a hen party, which I guess you guys in the States would call a bachelorette party. So here I was with some of my very, very, very dear friends who I'd been sharing Christ with for several years already. And at this bachelorette party, we had a stripper. I didn't know the stripper was going to arrive. And as it happened, he was behind the bar, he was serving drinks and he was dancing, doing his thing as well. Anyway, I went up and I asked for a drink and I asked him his name. And he wasn't just the builder and the buff, his name was Steve. And we had this conversation. He asked me what I did in life. And I said, I work with churches, I have a faith, I share my faith as part of my work. And he started asking all these questions about God. He said, oh, I think God might have spoken to me the other day. And I said, tell me more. And we were having this great conversation and I was getting to share with him how amazing Jesus is. And then behind me were all my friends going, oh my gosh, here she goes again. She's taking our time away from Steve. We want to be with Steve. We want to be dancing with Steve. And so one of my friends was kind of tugging on me on the back of my shirt saying, come on, Becca, you've had your time with him. It's our time now. And I was like, yeah, okay, I'll give you your time with this guy. So yeah, it wasn't a particularly good witness to my friends who were there in the sense that I was taking all the fun away from them. But at the same time, I had a great conversation with Steve, who I still pray for. God bless his soul. So yeah, that's just, yeah.
Wow.
Fun little story there.
So Becca, will you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your call to missions?
Yeah, so as you've already said, Jen, I'm a missionary living and working in France, and I've lived in France for over 17 years now. I've been involved in student ministry in the past in the UK and in France when I first arrived, church planting, discipling, and evangelism. what I'd like to share with you is my conversion story, because that has had such an impact on my life, obviously. So I went to an Anglican boarding school in the UK, not from a Christian family, but a lot of the teachers, including the director of the school, his wife, were keen Christians, evangelistic Christians. And they invited, for the first time when I was there, it was the first time they did it, my last year at high school, a group of guys from university who were involved in sports called Christians in Sport Mission. They came and they did a mission week at our school. And in the evenings, there was nowhere to go. You know, this was in a school, a bit like kind of Harry Potter set up in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of fields. And in the evenings, we were invited to go to these gospel talks and get free hot chocolate. So, you know, that was better than doing my homework in the boarding school house. So I went along to these talks, and God knows how to get the attention of a 17-year-old girl. So these guys were really good looking, fit, healthy, fun to be around. You know, I was having great conversations with them throughout the week. And on the last night that they were there, I was listening to this gospel presentation, and I believed in God, but I had no idea where Jesus fitted into the picture. And as the gospel was being shared, this very simple gospel message: you can be forgiven for your sins, you can have a relationship with God, and you can invite Jesus to live with you in your heart and be with you. At that moment, a light switch went on, and I knew Christ was there, and I invited him into my heart. And I then went on to go to university, where I was really involved in the Christian Union movement. And that's really where I grew as a Christian. But the sense of call to mission came probably towards the end of my first year at university. I remember being with the Christian Union, InterVarsity, I think in the States you call it. And there was this talk, time of worship, a talk, and the guy speaking, I forget his name, I don't even know, I can't remember what he did in life, but he was sharing from Isaiah chapter 6. And it's in this chapter that Isaiah is commissioned to be God's messenger to his people. And he has this vision of the Lord, this rather troublesome vision, where he gets a vision of God's holiness and God's power. And he hears the voice of the Lord saying to him, just after he's been told by God that his sins have been atoned for, his guilt has been taken away. He hears the voice of the Lord say, whom shall I send? And who will go for us? And Isaiah responds saying, here I am, send me. And the invitation from this speaker was, are you willing to be sent by the Lord wherever he calls you, wherever he tells you to go? And I just remember being struck by God's holiness, first of all, and how much I wanted other people to hear this gospel message. And I gave my life to the Lord and said, I will go wherever you send me.
Wow.
And it was a moment of, I guess, when I felt excited, but also slightly fearful, like what is God gonna call me to do now that I've given him my life to missions?
Wow. Yeah.
So during that same talk, I suddenly had the verse Matthew 9:38 in my mind, and the idea of praying for France. Now, I don't know if the speaker had mentioned France, or I can't remember, but I just remember looking up this verse in my Bible because I didn't know what it meant. Just heard Matthew 9:38. The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his harvest field.
Wow.
And that's when I had a passion to start praying for France. I had some French friends, I had some connection with France, but that's really when I first sensed a call to at least pray for France and be willing to go wherever God sent me.
Wow.
That's
amazing.
Yeah, that is beautiful, beautiful story.
And then God went on to confirm that call. And 3 years later, I had met with some missionaries that were about to move to France. And I again sensed this clear call from God. They had invited me to join them to restart a student ministry in Strasbourg. And I remember going to church. Before going to church one Sunday, I said to my best friend, I'm giving God today to tell me if I need to go or not. And the whole service was about Abram's call to go. And Genesis 12, verse 1, the Lord had said to Abraham, go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. My friend turned to me and she goes, are you okay? And tears coming down my eyes. And she said, he's just called you, hasn't he? And I said, yes. And it was that day that I made the decision to join a team of missionaries and to restart a student ministry in Strasbourg. And then later, there was the call to come to Loche, which is where I met Jen.
Becca, what were you studying in university?
So I studied English literature.
Okay.
Yeah. And then just after university, I went on to work with the Christian Union movement, get some training in discipling and evangelism, and
I ask
cross-cultural mission work as well.
Our young people in college sometimes, when they're studying something different, they don't see that God has always a plan, and so like it can be totally different. Like you weren't in Bible school, and then God called you in Bible school. You were studying literature, and so that's good.
And I actually really wanted to study art. I love art, I love painting, I love drawing, but I had the voice of my parents saying, art, you're not going to go far in life studying art, study literature, and then you can make the decision to do art afterwards. And I sort of remember being annoyed at not studying art, but at the same time, I see how God has used that now, because studying literature obviously is such a help to studying the Bible and understanding it. Yeah.
Oh wow,
that's
great.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense too. The literature part, I never thought of that. So Becca, we brought you on because we were talking about evangelism. Last episode, Jen shared with us one of her friends' books and how he broke down the different types of evangelists. So there was like preacher evangelist, kind of like the Billy Graham type, and then artist evangelist. She shared about an artist and church planter evangelist, street evangelist, event evangelist, apologetics evangelist, and then this idea of a soul winner evangelist, or a friendship or a relational evangelist. And she kind of put you in that spot. We would love to hear kind of how, from this journey that you just took us on to the call to missions, where did you start to sense and how did you discern that you were gifted with this gift of evangelism?
Yeah, so first of all, after I met with Christ for the first time, I realized that I probably wasn't like most Christians, in the sense that the day afterwards, I jumped out of bed. And I mean, the night before, when I given my life to Christ, there were several, students with me listening to this gospel message. The next day I woke up, I jumped out of bed, and I just remember having this joy in my heart and this burden to go and talk to my friends and ask them if they'd given their life to Christ. Last night, did you give your life to Christ? Did you meet with Jesus? Did you pray that prayer? Do you know you're saved? And, some of them would look at me and go, yeah, I prayed the prayer. Or, they just didn't have this, energy or desire to share what they'd experienced. And very quickly, very soon, bless her heart, my headmaster's wife came and found me one day, and she said, Becca, I hear you became a Christian. I said, yes. And she said, from what I heard, I think you might have the gift of evangelism. Because I was inviting my friends to these Bible studies that the chaplain was doing, once a week or whatever. And she said, have you got a Bible? And I said, no, I don't. And she said, I would like to gift you this study Bible and read it, and I think it will be really helpful. But remember, I don't think not everyone has this gift of evangelism. You need to use it wisely. And she just kind of, on the back of that, she guided me. She was probably my first spiritual mother, and she helped me share my faith in a very natural and not a forced way. And she really helped grow this gift of evangelism in me. Yeah,
that's cool. I think that's not just unique to, I don't think you're just unique to Christians. I think most people that I don't jump out of bed. So that's really cool that you jumped out of bed.
I don't now, but that was probably the first day of my life that I did.
But I do think it's really cool that you had someone recognize this gift so early in your career. Yeah. That's special. That's really special.
Yeah. And Becca, I wanted to ask, did you receive it from this lady, the headmaster's wife, right away? Because I remember, I think I have the gift of preaching and teaching, and when someone began kind of speaking into that, I was like, what? I wasn't rejecting it. There's some people who run away from it, but it took a while to kind of own it and kind of be confident and boast in the Lord. Like, when did you kind of say, oh yeah, I do have this gift?
So, I mean, I knew not everyone had this gift straight away, but it was more when I went to university and I was involved in the Christian Union movement. I had a guy 2 years above me who was sort of discipling me, and it was just in seeing the fruit in my relationships and having him and others come alongside me and say, yeah, you're an evangelist, this gift needs to be fanned into a flame and you don't want to lose it. So you need to be trained as an evangelist. So it was more at university when I stepped into the calling a bit more and I saw the fruit from that. And that's when I would go to these evangelist training weekends with the Christian Union or with church. And that's really when I sensed,
I love
I'm
that
an
you're saying
evangelist.
also that you went to training, because I think sometimes we can have the assumption that if we have a gift, that there's like this divine download and you have the gift and now you just do it. But, Paul says to Timothy not to neglect his gift and to pay attention to it and to work on it and to train it up. And so I love how you're pointing out too, Becca, that it's a both and, that yes, you have a special charisma, a gift for sharing the gospel, a passion that's not necessarily the same gift that God gives to every believer. And at the same time, you invested in it, in building it up and in training it up. That's so cool.
Yeah, I mean, I had a desire to answer people's questions. Why does God allow so much suffering? All these kind of apologetic questions. I didn't have the answers. I knew I needed to, get some information on that, have some answers ready.
Yeah.
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 Training is important. Yeah.
It is.
Mm.
So tell us a little bit about your ministry today. Like, what are you doing these days?
Yeah, so these days, I have 3 areas of ministry, I would say. So the first is my work in church. So I came to this small town in France 13 years ago where I met Jen and joined a church planting team. And I've stayed. I've stayed for those 13 years. I'm still here. That's one area of ministry. Second area of ministry is in a local Catholic church where I work. So I work 2 days a week as I don't know what you would call it, a monitor. So, surveying the canteen, the courtyard, helping kids with their study time. But I also have the amazing privilege of teaching the basics of Christianity to a small group of 15-year-old girls once a week. And then the third area of ministry is what I call general life ministries, where I dedicate time to building friendships and getting alongside people from all different walks of life, just as I go about my everyday life. So perhaps I can expand on each area of ministry, and I would love to just share a story from each area of how God's been at work recently. And I hope
Please
it'll
do.
encourage you as much as it's encouraged me. So church work, there's lots of different things going on. I love meeting with people that are not yet Christians, but who are eager to understand a bit more. So when there's someone like that wants to read the Bible with me, I'll go through and I'll give you resources later that you can use. But what I call the 7 signs of John, just very simply reading the Bible with them, these 7 miracles that happen in John's gospel, just talking about it and asking them questions. And then if they decide to become a Christian, I'm involved in discipling them, reading the Bible, studying it with them, helping them share their faith with other people. So there's the evangelism side, there's the discipling side. Also, I'm involved in preaching, leading services. And also, since last year, I was invited by the Catholic Church in our town that we have a great relationship with to be on their organizing team for the Alpha course. Many of you would have already heard of the Alpha course. And that was just an amazing privilege. And God was really at work. And we saw 16 people at the end of this course decide they wanted to follow Christ.
Oh my
And
gosh.
it was just a great experience to be part of.
Wow.
And that's starting up again this September. But just one story from church. So when we first started the church 13 years ago, there was this lady that would walk past, one of our neighbors that would walk past when we were praying every morning in church, and we had these big windows everyone could see into. We're very transparent about what we were doing, who we were. And one day she stepped into the church and she joined our prayer group, and I got to know this woman and we started reading the Bible together. She was she was happy to do that. She gave her life to Christ, and then I was discipling her. And I say we're a community. This is a community effort where we are bringing people to Christ and helping them grow. And, this hasn't been a quick transformation, but this woman now is healed from so many things, has been delivered from so many things. And today she has a heart to share her faith. And I just meet with her over coffee once a week. We read the Bible, we pray. It's as simple as that. We ask God to help us in the different areas we're involved in life. And, that's just one example of someone's life that's been transformed through church and coming to know Christ. And then the second area of ministry is school. So for 7 years, I've been working in a Catholic school. And it was only 2 years ago, and they knew I was Protestant, I worked with the church. 2 years ago, they asked me to, I think it took them 5 years to realize that I was a Christian, that I wasn't a weird Protestant. And they asked me whether I would lead this group. Each kid has to be part of what we call a pastoral group, where they hear about the gospel and they learn about Christ. And I was asked to take on a group of 15-year-old girls who were mainly agnostics or atheists. And I said, yeah, that sounds great, but what do you exactly want me to do? And the remit from the director was share Christ with them and help them come to know him. I was like, that's right up my street. Okay, let's do it. And at the end of this year, so I've been doing that for 2 years, and it's been a wonderful experience. We've watched The Chosen, we've had debates, we've just talked about life in general, and it's just been so much fun. But at the end of this year, I asked these girls to fill out a questionnaire, and one of the questions is, what have you learned this year that is new or surprising to you? And one girl who always seemed grumpy during my classes, I wondered, why are you here? You just look so sad and bored. And she replied, I've learned that Jesus is the Son of God. Today he lives in me. And I have learned to worship him. And I was there going, wow, God's grace is sometimes so surprising. He will reach the people that look the furthest away from him.
Wow.
So that is just an amazing privilege. And I look forward to seeing this girl at the beginning of term next week, and I'll see how she's doing in her faith.
Wow.
And general life ministry is the third area. I mean, like Jen said, I love meeting people. I love getting to know different people, finding out about, I'm just curious about different people's lives, what they do, what their struggles are. And I just look to get alongside friends, neighbors, anyone that God puts in my path, to love them simply and pray for those opportunities to share the faith with them. And I just think of Easter this year. I had a neighbor text me just before I was about to go to church, and she said, Becca, can I come round for a coffee? I'd love to see you and catch up. I said, look, I would love for you to come round, but now is not a good moment. I'm just going to church. And I thought within the context, I could invite her. I said, would you like to come? And she said, she texted us back and she was like, yeah, that sounds great. When shall I be there? I said, I'm leaving in like 5 minutes. She's like, yeah, closing the door now. I'll see you in a second. So this neighbor came to church for the first time. And I love it when people that have never stepped into a church are just so natural and authentic. We have all these codes, these ways of being in church. I mean, in the beginning, when the church service was being introduced, she just stood up and she said, hey, I'm here for the first time. I don't know what's happening. I don't know about church, but just thank you for having me here. And then she started unburdening her struggles, talking about her pain. And we were just very simply able to pray with her, be with her. She met with God that day. Wow. And even though she doesn't want to study the Bible, she's got a very busy life at the moment, she doesn't want to take that step further. That was a moment in her life when God touched her. Yeah. And that was on the back, not only of me having a friendship with her. I live in a street with another Christian woman, and together we pray for our neighbours once a week. And she's been another witness to this lady. So yeah, I mean, I have loads of stories like that. I'm
So
just thinking
great.
of another one if we've got time for me to share this.
Go for it.
So another friend I met with recently, and she just said, "Hey, I've got this podcast I've been listening to. I'd love for you to listen to it. It's about spirituality, and let me know what you think as a Christian about it." I said, "Yeah, sure. I'll listen to it and let you know what I think." Now, this friend I've been praying for 7 years. We've had some spiritual conversations, not very many. I mean, I share naturally about my life, what I do. Anyway, so on the back of this podcast, I've been able to share my hope that I have in Christ with her. And the other day we were in the car together and she just said to me, "Becca, I do all these things. I go to yoga, I see a psychiatrist, I see a psychologist, I do sport, I read, I meditate, but there's just something missing in my life. I feel like there's a block in my life." And I just turned to her and I said, "You know what you need, don't you?" And she said, "Yeah, I need God to do something." I said, "Well, would you like to pray? Would you like to ask him to help you now?" And she said, "No, I don't want to pray, but I would love for you to pray for me." So I prayed, and just at the very end of my prayer, she spontaneously came out with, "Jesus, help me get unblocked." Very simple prayer. She hasn't yet given her life to Christ, but God is working in her life, and it's just a privilege. It's a joy. It's sometimes, comes out of the
love it.
blue, these opportunities just to help people along with their faith
Yeah.
wherever they're at.
Reminds me of the guy who was like, Jesus, I believe, help my unbelief. Like
Yeah.
sometimes we have to start with, help me just get unblocked. I love that. Yeah.
That's wow. I got chills, goosebumps. I love these stories. I was really moved with all of them, specifically with the young lady sort of professing like so clearly, and kind of lets me think of a question I referenced on the last episode, Ephesians 4:11, about the Paul saying he gave some apostles, some prophets, some evangelists, some pastors and teachers for the equipping of the saints, for the work of ministry, for the building up the body of Christ. And in my church, we just started, I'm a church planter here in Italy. We just started finally doing church membership. And one of the things we have to do is ask, since we're small, we've mostly led them to Christ. So I know that they're believers. I was there when they accepted the Lord, but sort of like part of the step is for them to repeat and the profession of faith, and some of them were struggling, and I know that it was just because we didn't equip them to clearly define what the gospel is, and which goes with the evangelism. So I guess my question is, how do you equip the saints in the body of Christ as evangelists? How does that look like as a church planter, as a pastor? How do I equip my church members so they can give me good answers?
Yeah, I think it's a really important question, and it's something that I've learned to do over time, because I'll go into that later, but sometimes evangelists think that all their work should be done outside of the church and we're not needed in the church. But yeah, now I'm a great believer of just getting alongside people on an individual basis, encouraging them in their faith, encouraging them to share their faith with their friends and their family in a very just natural and authentic way. And also sharing with them how to share their testimony. I think that's one of the basic things that we can be doing as evangelists within the church, is helping people share their story, not just their conversion story, but where they're at now with the Lord. How can they share with their friend that they're meeting next week about how they've seen answered prayer, or how they've seen God just move in their lives recently? So yeah, equipping people to give testimonies. I have been, known to give evangelism training courses in the church before, and I'm preparing one now to do in this fall. So yeah, that's another thing that we can do. I mean, every evangelist is different within the church, and we have to focus on the things that we're most equipped to do. And what I'm most equipped to do and feel most comfortable with is not necessarily the upfront training, but just having those conversations at the end of church. So who have you shared Christ with recently? What are your struggles? Why do you think you don't want to share Christ? It's just having those one-to-one chats with people, getting alongside them and helping them think outside of the box sometimes of how they can be sharing their faith. Also giving resources. Recently I've given a book to a girl just about how to share her faith more naturally, things like that.
I love that. Becca, we talked a little bit in the first episode about this, how there are people that are gifted as evangelists like you, but that all believers are called to be witnesses and do just what you're saying, just be able to articulate, I know how I've experienced God. If I'm a witness to, I don't know, a crime or a marriage or whatever, it just means I saw it happen and I could say what I saw. So if I'm being a witness to Jesus, it's just saying, I see Jesus at work in and around me, and here's what I saw. And I think it's funny how complicated we can make that. And one of the things I love about the evangelists in my life and you specifically that I see is it comes with so much joy and ease and authenticity. It doesn't feel manufactured. It doesn't actually feel like you're checking a box off today. Who did I share Christ with? And I can get into that like, I need to check the box. So I love what you've just said about, just giving those I think, first of all, just being around evangelists helps me remember, oh, yeah, this is good news. Oh, yeah, this is good news I shouldn't keep to myself because you have this natural way of just exuding it that sometimes I can, like Jesse said last time, hide it under a bushel without even meaning to. So, first of all, I think evangelists just being exposed to those stories, to your experiences, helps fan the flame in me to want to bear witness. But then also, what you're talking about, it's not just being able to articulate your conversion story, it's being able, when I am at lunch with a friend and I mean, this happened to me recently where my friend was really struggling with some things. And I just shared how I navigate that. Well, I'm a believer. I navigate that with Christ. I navigate that with prayer. I navigate that situation in this way. And it was authentic. It was not manufactured. It just came out of my genuine experience of bearing witness to the Lord. But I know that it's being around people like you with that gift that helped me remember that it is actually that simple.
So I guess one of the things that would be great for us to talk about or to hear a little bit is, we talked about earlier, Becca, you mentioned how you had been trained pretty quickly in your conversion and your realization of this gift. What are some, I don't know, what are some things that you could share with us, those of us who might want to share the gospel or be a witness in our communities but aren't gifted? What would be some things that you could share with us that work well, or maybe some things even that you could say like that doesn't really work well? Maybe I'll save you the time so that you don't have fail stories. Yeah, what could you share with us?
Yeah, well, I think about this verse, and I think Jen shared it in the last podcast, 1 Peter 3:15. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. We're invited to share what we've seen and heard. And I love this. Always be prepared. Be prepared to share your faith. Be equipped with some basic knowledge, basic answers to questions that people are asking at the moment. But already having the desire and the eagerness to share the gospel is all you need, really. And faith in God. What works well is people who pray. Every day I pray, and it's not something that evangelists should be doing, it's everyone. I pray that God will put me in the path of those people in whose hearts he's already at work. I think if there's some fear that you might have about sharing Christ or opening up a conversation about faith, pray that God will give you boldness and courage and natural, authentic opportunities just to share your spiritual journey with someone and be an encouragement and a blessing to them. Like I said before, learn to give your testimony. What doesn't work well, I think this is something I learned very early on and had people counsel me on, which I'm grateful for, is don't talk too much. This is the whole premise of the Alpha course. If you know something about it, it's, let people speak 70-80% of the time and listen to what's going on with someone behind the question of why is there so much suffering in the world? Are they asking this question because they're going through suffering themselves or a family member is dying? Don't be too quick to jump in and give a gospel answer, an apologetic response. Let's be compassionate and listen to people. What is behind those questions that they're asking? I used to think I was only useful to God when I was having spiritual conversations. And I think sometimes as evangelists, we can unconsciously give this message to others that don't have the gift and make them feel guilty that they're not sharing their faith. But we can share our faith in so many different ways. It's with acts, in our acts and the things we do, as well as speaking. And the speaking part is essential. But let's be asking God to give us creativity in the way that we love people, and to just give us opportunities to share something of him with people and watch him move. It's so exciting. He will do that. I have friends that aren't evangelists. They'll phone me up and they say, I had the opportunity to chat with someone the other day and share my faith and invite them in a prayer. I don't do that. But it happens. It can happen. And God can use you wherever you're at. But yeah, prayer is the backbone to everything.
Very, very cool. I want to start to wrap us up, but I want to pose a question in a different way, I think, than maybe I thought before or we thought before. I want to ask the question like this: how can the church support, help, encourage the evangelist amongst it?
Great question. I think, first of all, the church needs to be, just have it on their radar that there are evangelists in the church. Be looking out for them and be identifying them and helping equip them with the training that they need. And just basically have it on their radar. Because we can often have this image in the church of, the pastors up here, you've got the deacons, you've got the counselor, you've got the Sunday school teacher, but who are the evangelists? So just being aware as pastors in particular, who are the evangelists in your congregation, and encouraging them to meet other evangelists and get the basic training they need. But you as pastors and missionaries listening to this podcast, you can be helping those evangelists yourself by opening up the Bible, like that woman did, my headmaster's wife. She gave me a Bible, and she'd actually, I didn't mention this earlier, but she'd written down some verses on a little bit of paper to help me see who an evangelist was and what they did. And, you can really be discipling young evangelists, particularly in who they are and equipping them.
Well, thank you so much.
That's a very basic answer, but there you go.
Yeah. So I think sometimes we overlook those very basic things. I wrote in big on my notes that I'm taking here: listen. Such a very small or very simple thing, but it has a huge impact when we just listen. So we often overlook those. Hey, well, thank you so much, Becca, for jumping on this podcast and joining us. We've appreciated every moment, every story. I think you have a book that you should be writing, filled with these stories that could encourage so many people.
Starting with the stripper, sharing life with the stripper.
Yes, that might need to be the title of this podcast. We interviewed the stripper evangelist. No, just joking. So, yes, thank you so much again, Becca. Thank you, Jen, for introducing us all to Becca. And I hope this was really helpful for you guys that are listening. It was interesting as Becca was speaking. One of the things that came to me, and I know this might be a little cheesy, but I'm also a new dad. Going where God is at work, even if it means inside of other denominations like a Catholic church or so forth. I just think that was so cool to hear that you were really open to wherever God is at work. And so I guess the question I'd pose to our audience is, can you look and seek the Lord for where is he at work in your context? And can you go where he's at? Thank you all for listening. Go ahead and leave us a comment on where you're going to share and witness your faith. And please go ahead and leave us all the different ratings and everything that you're supposed to do on the social media podcasting world. You already know what to do. So thank you so much for listening to Going Where God is at Work.